Well, hello, hello, and happy Friday. Whether it is morning, mid morning, or lunchtime, I am so glad that you have decided to spend a few minutes of your Friday with me. Today's topic, which is piggybacking on this week's episode of the Driven Woman Entrepreneur Podcast, is about the problem, the very legitimate and pretty stressful problem of being too creative. Yes, you heard me say it. You can actually be too creative. And what I mean by that is if you happen to have an idea fountain, an idea factory, an idea engine, a busy brain that is chock full of creativity, and it requires very little effort, if any effort, on your part to hit that tripwire and get the party started, then you are no stranger to the frustration that comes with having one brilliant idea after the next and not being able to have the time to implement them. Now, you might be the kind of creative who gets a brilliant idea, falls madly, desperately, obsessively in love with that idea, and can't wait to get started making it a reality. It's like infatuation, right? And what goes on in our brain is really no different than if you were actually falling in love with a real life romantic partner. Your brain lights up with all the great brain chemicals that make you feel so good and want to keep doing what you're doing, like a Christmas tree. Now, if you're the kind of creative who happens to get a really big, really brilliant idea, it's a complex idea. It could be a book that you want to write, a TED talk that you want to deliver. It could be a screenplay. It could be a stand up routine. It could be an installation. It could be whatever your particular art, your particular gift, your particular way of being a creative in the world is. And if it's something that you're getting paid for, this is a really important experience for you. But if you are this kind of creative, once you get going, you have that creative spark. I mean, let's be honest, the pilot light is always lit on your creativity. And then sometimes it just cranks itself up. And now you've got the ability to really make the steak sizzle, make the pot boil, whatever analogy you like. I'm not very domesticated, so I'm going to drop those analogies like yesterday's newspaper. At any rate, you get going with that creative idea. You start implementing it, you start executing it. If you are like many highly creative people, especially if you are a grown up gifted child or someone who was diagnosed with ADHD or could or should have been, maybe you were diagnosed later as an adult like I was and many others, at some point, something's going to happen. You're up to your eyelashes in creating this thing that has visited itself upon your brain. And now you reach some point where, I don't know, maybe you're just past the starting blocks. Maybe you're just really barely getting going. But more than likely, you are somewhere between 50% of the way into a genuine implementation. And if it's, again, a big project, let's say it's a book, you just wake up with a fully formed and absolutely genius book idea. It's happened to me many times. You wake up with the idea. So maybe you sketch it out, maybe you create the outline, and then you sit down and you start writing. Maybe you get a few chapters out. But sooner or later, what's going to happen is one of the following. One, you're going to get interrupted. And I don't just mean like, honey, lunch. No, I'm talking about hardcore interruption. Something's going to happen that's going to sideline you, that's going to derail you, that is going to grab you by the throat and yank you away from your beloved the creative thing that you're doing right now. And it will effectively disrupt your flow state so completely that it may be exceptionally hard for you to reconnect with that creative work. And it could be anything. Your dog might have to go to the vet for an emergency procedure. You might be you might experience what I've been dealing with for the last 10 days. Woke up with a toothache and the situation rapidly escalated to revealing itself as a failed root canal and an abscess. That's disruptive. This is the first day I've been able to do a live stream, and half my mouth is still numb. And we're just getting the party started. I'm still in treatment for the abscess. We haven't even really started to address the tooth yet. But be that as it may, could be that your kid gets sick, or your mom falls and breaks a hip. You could even just have a big fight with a neighbor who thinks you're deliberately planting things that lean over their side of the fence. It doesn't matter what it is. It's what I call the "and then something happened" phenomenon. Because sooner or later, something will happen. Something will hijack you. Or the thing that will interrupt you from making mad, passionate love to your creative project. And again, if you are a person with ADHD, you will be in a state of creative hyperfocus. You will forget to eat. You will forget to sleep. You will forget that you have a partner and kids and obligations and bills to pay. You will forget to put the trash out. You will forget to move your car to the other side of the street because it's trash day and get a ticket, because you will be obsessively expressing on that creative project. Now, obviously, you need guardrails in place, and we're going to talk about that in a few minutes, or I'm going to talk about that in a few minutes because you're watching this later probably. But be that as it may, there's either going to be some sort of life event, big or small, that will interrupt, and then you're going to have a hell of a time trying to get back into that creative hyperfocus. And this is why people like us, people with big ideas and busy brains, tend to have untold numbers of brilliant projects that they have started and not finished. Sometimes I experiment with this when I've moved 3 times in the last 3 years. Another story for another day. But sometimes when I'm meeting someone new and I just think I'm just going to give them quick and dirty taste of who I am, I'll say, well, one thing you should know about me is I'm a much better starter than I am a finisher. Now, if they are a very disciplined person who's neurotypical and not terribly creative, they'll give me a blank stare and I'll know we're probably not going to be besties. If they smile and nod in recognition and then they kind of look up and to the left, they are a person like me and you. They will be going through the card catalog of some of their own experiences of it starting and not finishing. But if you don't end up getting hijacked by some sort of life event, then one of these other things is going to happen. And sometimes you get a cluster, right? Like you get all of them. It's like a gangbang. All of these things happen and they all gang up on you and you just feel like it's not meant to be. That's not actually the correct conclusion to draw, but many of us do. The other thing that can happen is that you run out of juice, you run out of gas. The more you are expressing this creative idea, the more it literally seems to dry up and evaporate in front of you. It's like after that 3 to 6 months of a new romantic relationship, where you start noticing that you don't like their mouth sounds when they eat in your presence, or they have a laugh that sounds a little bit too much like a hyena on crack, and you cannot believe you didn't notice this in the first few months when you were under the influence of all those infatuation chemicals. Well, guess what? That happens with our ideas too. So if you haven't been interrupted by your kid, having weed on them at school, you may just find that you lose interest in your creative project. You literally start to become bored with this thing that, at least for however long it's lasted until this event occurs, you were absolutely certain that this is going to be the one. This is going to be the one that's going to make you a household word, or at least a lot more shekels than you've currently got in your account. I think a lot of us creative types experience so much shame about this happening. We don't really understand what's going on, and we definitely don't know what to do about it. But this experience is extremely common for the highly creative person. And by the way, I probably should have started by saying, at least in my opinion, or I sometimes say my not so humble opinion, what is a highly creative person? I probably should have started with that. So let's just kind of roll back a little bit. In my opinion and experience, a highly creative person is someone who thinks about conventional things in unconventional ways, has a slightly left, right of center interpretation of things. They are a person who looks at something and sees something different than other people who are looking at that same thing. One of my particular forms of creativity is when I'm out in nature and I just happen to look at a plant or a cloud formation or somebody's dog when they're walking by. And I happen to score very high on pattern recognition. It's just one of those things. And I will see this plant or this dog or this cloud and think, you know what that looks like? And it'll be something completely unrelated to dogs, plants, and clouds. But in my mind, I've just made this observation. Sometimes it's funny, sometimes it's bizarre, sometimes it's kind of sexual, but that's a form of creativity. Having an offbeat sense of humor is a form of creativity. Not being very good at following directions because you need to figure things out on your own, that is a form of creativity. So I am not only speaking to and about and on behalf of people who make their living as artists. And that, again, is a broad category. You could be an actor, singer, dancer, mime. You could be a writer, a storyteller. You could be a content creator, a graphic artist, an interior designer, a hair designer, a seamstress, a makeup artist. You could be anything. And those are just the arts and the performing arts. But you could also be a programmer. You could be a social entrepreneur. You could create SaaS products. You could be in marketing. It's doing what you do in a highly creative way, in a highly original way. And if you are a personal brand, learning how to do it in a way that is instantly recognizable as you. So I digress. Highly creative people get these wonderful ideas, dive on in. It's very pleasurable. It's our literal favorite thing, better than food, better than drugs, better than sex. It feels so good to have a creative idea and immediately start executing on it. Doesn't feel so great when you abandon that idea. Doesn't feel so great when you get pulled away from that idea while you are still hardcore in love with it, and then you can't seem to get the feeling back. It also doesn't feel great when the third thing that can happen happens. So there's the interruption, the life interruption, and then you just can't get the feeling back. There is the running out of love option, where it can be from one moment to the next, one day to the next. You could literally be mid-sentence in your magnum opus, and all of a sudden your mind goes blank and you have no joy juice left to give. Or it can happen gradually, and it just becomes more and more and more effortful to keep going. And eventually you stop, because I don't know about you, but trying to create from that place is somewhere between impossible and extremely painful. But the third thing that can happen is you get another new idea. Imagine that. While you are in the process of developing, implementing, executing, literally breathing life into your creation, godlike. I mean, as long as it's an idea in your head, that's fantasy, right? Feels good, but you're not sharing it with anybody, and you certainly aren't going to make any money if it remains in the attic. When you implement and you don't get interrupted, or you don't just get bored with it and stop, the other thing that happens to highly creative people is this: they get stuck. We get stuck. Because what carries us into the creative project is the excitement, is the passion, is all the wonderful brain chemistry that is also associated with impulsivity, sensation seeking, risk taking. Any of this sound familiar? We literally jump into something before we have thought it through. It doesn't occur to us to hit the brakes or sit down and whip up a spreadsheet. We usually just jump in and get started. And I can tell you from my own personal life history how rapidly you can spend large amounts of money, which you may or may not have, purchasing all the supplies that you somehow think you're going to need to create this thing that only existed in your mind within the last few minutes, days, hours, weeks. And before that, you never even heard of it before. You can blow through a lot of cash really fast. So what do you do when you either get interrupted, you fall out of love, or another idea comes your way? Unwanted, uninvited, unnecessary, because you've already got something you're locked and loaded on, and you're actually making progress. It's a very strange problem to have, and it's very difficult to explain to people who do not. Ideas that while you are in the midst of executing on one of them, another one comes pounding on the door of your brain, demanding to be let in, refusing to wait its turn, and diverts you to that new idea. Yeah, that's exactly what I'm telling you. There are people out there, I don't happen to know any personally, but I know they exist, and they're probably numerous, that are able to have multiple creative projects in various stages at the same time. That's cool. I'm kind of jealous of that or envious, whichever one. Usually those people are doing multiple similar projects at the same time. So I work with a lot of writers, screenwriters, technical writers, creative writers, nonfiction writers, all kinds of writers. They may be working on 5, 6, 8, 10 different written works of various lengths at the same time. And if they're making their living as a writer and they have various income sources from writing, and they're always mindful of their deadlines, either self-imposed or imposed by who's ever signing the check, that is actually very helpful for people who have this type of problem in being highly creative. Because when they get interrupted and they just can't get back on track, they can just plug into one of the other projects that is easier for them to re-engage with. If they just kind of fall out of love with the project, they're just noticing that it's just taking longer and longer, and it just doesn't feel that great, switch to another project. Do that one for a while, and then come back. But let's just say that you're not a writer, or you've got one big project, not multiple projects that you can kind of, it's not multitask, it's task switching. When you can task switch, that is one of the ways that you can deal with this problem. It's an actual strategy, right? If you know sooner or later you're going to get interrupted and have a hard time getting back on track, if you know that you're going to basically interrupt yourself by getting bored or losing interest, or you're going to get another idea and then you're going to desperately want to chase that one instead of continuing to engage with the one you're already working on, then you need other tools. Let's say you've only got one big thing that you have to do or that you are doing, and that's how you work. You don't have multiple projects. You got one big project. How are you going to deal with those 3 types of interruptions? And the fact that as a highly creative person, I don't have to know you to know that you are also dealing with procrastination, perfectionism, people-pleasing, imposter complex, and rejection sensitivity. And all of those things are ongoing challenges that slow you down, derail you, and even if you keep going, they just make the work less joyful and more effortful. So here are some things that I recommend that I teach my clients and that I use to manage my own highly creative tendencies. I know I'm a perfectionist. I always have been, always will be. Various times I thought I could curb my enthusiasm for perfection. I thought if I made my screen name Recovering Perfectionist, that would somehow trick my brain. Hasn't yet, but you never know. I think it's really important to do all of the following. Maybe not on every project, every day, all the time, but you got to have these things in your toolbox. You have to remember that they are in your toolbox, and you have to remember to use them regularly. Because when we don't it's getting my work is getting slow. I'm slowing down. I'm not feeling energized. I'm not feeling creative. I have writer's block. I didn't get a visit from the muse today. I didn't sleep well. I drank too much. Like whatever. It could be anything. It could be all the things. I'm just going to take 10 minutes and go see what's happening on social media. I'm just going to go check out some of my favorite creators on TikTok, or I'm just going to go play with the dog, or I'm just going to go down the street to Hobby Lobby, or I'm just going to go to Starbucks. And it's like, okay, if you have the discipline to take that break, keep yourself on a retractable dog leash in your mind and get back to work when you get back to the office, get back to the home office, get back to your co-working, get back to your back bedroom, wherever you're working from. Yeah, take a break. Taking breaks, either planned or when you feel you need one, can always be a good idea. And if you really want to make it more worthwhile, instead of like sitting in front of your computer where you're writing and feeling that you're slowing down, you're getting bored, you're disengaging, you're becoming distracted, or you're becoming obsessed with perfectionism, it's taking longer and longer and longer, take a frickin' break already. But don't take a break for TikTok. Don't take a break for Netflix. Don't take a break for YouTube. Don't take a break for Instagram, because that's still screen staring. That's still screen sucking. And it's not actually going to be a pattern interrupt for your brain that's going to shift your state, shift your energy, shift your motivation, attention, and all the rest. Do something physical. Go take a walk. You want to go to Starbucks? Go to Starbucks. I love Starbucks. But ride your bike there, or walk there, or walk there with the dog. That's a twofer. You get to walk the dog and get the Starbucks. But move your body. It's one of the most reliable ways I know to shift your state, to re-energize your creative process. And it's free. In fact, you can just leave watching this right now and go do that. I'm not kidding. Oh, you're still here? Okay, so let me give you a couple more. Take a break, shift your state, move your body. Drink more water. It is unbelievable how the number one cause for fatigue, and fatigue can be physical and it can also be mental. And if you are a highly creative person, you're not going to think, I'm fatigued. You're going to think, I'm bored. This is boring. But it's not even because it's boring or because you're fatigued. You're dehydrated. Well, how about that? I bought this wonderful bottle from the Swell Company that has a little chargeable thing on the base that lights up and flashes at me when it's neglected for too long, because I won't remember to drink. I'll dry up and blow away like a skeleton in the desert. Actually, I live in the desert now, but seriously, you got to drink more water. I also think one of the ways that's really helpful to get around your perfectionism is not staring at the screen, is not trying to force yourself to think that it's good enough. Perfectionism is a personality trait, but it's also a habit. And while you may not be able to get rid of the personality trait, I haven't, you can work with the habitual part of it, which is overthinking, second guessing, fondling whatever it is that you're doing way too long, fluffing the pillows, rearranging it. Probably not going to be any better. You're just indulging in the habit of perfectionism. So give yourself a time limit. When I ask someone, let's say I'm working with someone who does content marketing for their business, and I ask them, okay, you're a blogger, cool. How long does it take? How often do you blog? Weekly. Awesome. How long are your blogs? 2,000 words. Great. How long does it take you to write these blogs? Usually there's a pause. And then it's like, well, I never really know. I'm like, stop right there. If you don't know how long it takes you to do something, I promise you, The reason is because you're a perfectionist. So in order to work with that tendency, which you probably aren't going to be successful at trying to change, and honestly, why? You don't need to. Accept that you're a perfectionist, accept that work fills the time allotted. And if you tell yourself, I got to get a blog post done every week, I don't know how long it's going to take. I'm just going to sit down and work until it's done. Wrong. If you give a blog post all the time it needs, it will take all the time you've got and then some. Why do you think it is that there are content creators who can write a solid blog post, high quality blog post, the kind of post that gets them followers, likes, comments, and occasionally shares? How is it possible that one creator can do this consistently in a couple of hours and another person needs an entire day or more? I'll tell you what, it is creating the practice and making it a habit. That's part of it. But the other part is the one who gets it done in a lot less time simply doesn't give themselves more time to get it done. Mic drop moment there for you. So schedule your work and treat the deadline like a boss. This is a little bit tricky when you're self-employed, but you can learn to do it. I've been self-employed since 2010, and I used to rely very heavily on external accountability to get anything done. First of all, I'd wait till the last second. Then I would produce something under pressure and just barely slide across the finish line at the very last possible second. Technically, I was in compliance. Technically, I was getting it done on time, but I'm very certain it was not the best quality work of which I was capable, and it created a lot of resentment and stress with whoever was waiting for it. So tell yourself, this is how much time I'm going to give a blog post. And that's how much time it'll take. I remember when I was in coach training back in 2015, 2016, and we were at the coaching school and we were given a written exam, kind of like a pop quiz kind of thing. And at this stage of life, you would think I would have already had something like this in the bag. But it was very interesting to me to observe how I went about this thing. Yes, I cared that, I represented myself well. I wanted to do well. It's not like they could flunk me. I was there voluntarily. There were no grades. But I didn't realize until afterwards that what I did wrong in that situation is something that I now teach people to do the opposite. And this is the last thing I'm going to share with you for today. What I should have done is looked at that quiz, that written assignment, read all the way, taken the first couple minutes because it was timed. We were told this is how much time you're going to have to do it. Read all the way through it. Take a quick estimate in your mind how long each of the components will take. Because in any creative project, there are parts that just flow so smooth and easy, and other parts that require more energetic output from us. We have to kind of plan for that. I didn't do any of that. If I had flipped through all the pages and thought, okay, this is not just one assignment here. It is multiple pieces of an assignment. And each piece requires something different from me. Some of it I could do in my sleep with half my brain tied behind my back, and other parts of it I really need to stop and think and organize and so forth. But if I had looked all the way through it, and then I would have realized, okay, this is how much time I have for all the parts. instead of seeing it as one thing, and kind of consulted my watch periodically to make sure that I was roughly allocating the right amount of time and energy and focus for each of the parts, I could have performed significantly better on that assignment. What I did was, oh, goody, a pop quiz, an opportunity to express myself. Looked at the cover, saw what the first part of the assignment was, and immediately got to work on it. After a few minutes, the announcement came, this is how much time we have. Oh, okay, no problem, no problem. I didn't get anywhere near finishing that thing. Other people did. And I was stunned. I'm a good writer. I have a master's degree. I have a bachelor's in communication. I'm a really good writer. But what I didn't do in this setting was understand that as a highly creative person, I'm always going to try to do my best, not even choosing it. That's my default setting. I'm always going to try to do my best. I'm always going to apply perfectionistic standards to what is enough. And any creative project is not one thing. It is a series of things which require different abilities, different strengths, different skills, different talents, and different amounts of energetic output. Now I understand that I have to plan for the interruptions and how to get back on track. I have to plan for the inevitable boredom and running out of gas and how to get back on track. I have to plan to be hijacked by my own next best ideas and what to do about that. But I also have to plan to manage my own creativity in the way that I view the project as not one thing, but as a series of things that each requires something different from me. I hope that that was helpful. I hope that that resonates with you. Hey, ladies, glad to see you here. I hope that this gives you some insight into things you can do for your own creative process. And if you use these techniques or they resonate with you, or even better, you have a technique that you'd like to share with me that helps you manage your highly creative mind, message me, DM me on any of the platforms where this is being shared, or send me a DM at Coach Diane Wingert on LinkedIn or Instagram. Thank you for spending some time with me today. And remember, your creativity is only a gift if you know how to manage it well. Bye for now, and I'll be back next week, same place, same time.